All right. So this is my friend Kason.
Hello.
Why don't you go ahead and give a little introduction for yourself first?
Yeah, I am Kason, and I'm Shane's friend on the other side of the country. Yeah, not much famous or interesting about me. Going to school, graduating in December. That's exciting, and yeah, that's boring old me.
I already said what topic we were going to go over, but basically, Kason wanted to talk about the state of gaming, specifically looking at the two sides of gaming right now. You have AAA studios and multi-billion-dollar companies and the decisions they're making. And then you have the smaller, more niche section, which is dedicated to indie games. Let's start simple. Why don't you tell everyone what you grew up on in gaming? Tell us your first console and stuff like that.
All right, so my first console was a Leapfrog when I was all of 5 years old.
Right.
Right, yes. I don't remember anything of that. That just entered my head, but I completely forgot about that till you just asked it. No, in all seriousness, I started on the Wii. That was our big family console. I played that thing a ton, especially over the summer. That was always my jam. I love just a lot of Nintendo stuff. They've always been very charming to me, and just they've always had that niche of just always creating something, no matter if maybe it doesn't sell well. They always have some sort of cool idea or some golden nugget in those games. And so starting from the Wii, then I bought myself a Wii U. I am one of those people that had that poor console. I never really owned an Xbox or PlayStation growing up. I never really played any of my friends' consoles in that regard. Once maybe I was more like 15, 16, somewhere around there, I got into PC gaming. And that's mostly probably where I play now. That's also where a lot of indie games reside, which is why I chose that topic, because I do have more of a love now for indie games than AAA games, even though I grew up on like the cream of the crop, Mario, Zelda. I had a DS, so probably had Pokemon and a bunch of other stuff. So not to say that I hate AAA. I do not. I was literally playing Jedi Survivor earlier today.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they're two different camps, as we'll get into.
Yeah. So what would you say was like, it doesn't have to be your favorite, but a game that you look back on that you played when you were younger that you just really you appreciate now in its time?
I think I did think about this before the podcast. It's like I never have an answer whenever someone asks for my favorite video game, but I thought about it for a little bit. I know that wasn't the question you asked, but it kind of is.
Yeah, it's kind of, it's like not your current favorite.
It's not my current favorite, but I feel like all-time favorite would be Super Mario Galaxy. There's just something with Koji Kondo's, I think Koji Kondo did the soundtrack. Yeah, that sounds right. His just ethereal soundtrack mixed with there's that vibe of space I feel like has never been touched again. The just charming yet vastness of all the galaxies. Like you feel like there's so much more that you aren't seeing past the camera. But it's really just small, tight-packed little levels, and the gameplay is outstanding. The story, I mean, all Mario games don't really have much story, so that's nothing to write home about, but just the aesthetics of that game. I loved it then. I played it when they re-released it on the Switch, and I had just as much fun, if not more, now that I'm older.
Yeah, Super Mario Galaxy is solid. I know a lot of Nintendo fans kind of pick that as their favorite. I mean, it's weird. It's like how that game has affected so many people. It's crazy how many people like consider that to be one of the best games of all time.
Yeah, because like at first I wouldn't put it in like a top 10 most influential video games of all time, but I feel like, yeah, as you were saying, a lot of people view that as influential in their lives. Now, for me personally, I say that's my favorite of all time, but um, even then, I still view Super Mario Odyssey as a better game, but it doesn't reach that like aesthetic. There's something with the combination that works with Galaxy that Odyssey just slightly under, but Odyssey by far probably one of the most played games of all time for me.
Like most amount of hours, or
Probably most amount of hours, yeah. That I do not replay games. That's something that I don't know. I just don't do it. I really cherish first time experiences, but that game I think I've replayed the most out of any game.
what do you said you have PC now? What else do you have now?
Yeah, I have a lot more now that I have money, because as a kid, you're stuck with what you got for Christmas. But I don't have a gaming PC anymore. That's what I started with, just a nice desktop rig, but that's sadly in the trash. So now I have a Steam Deck, which is fabulous. I love that thing. I have the Switch. I have a modded 3DS that has basically every 3DS, DS, and Game Boy game that you could think of on there. I think, oh, and then a PlayStation 5. Yes. I was trying to think what was around my desk, but that's downstairs, so that's why I couldn't think of it.
What kind of got you into indie games in the beginning? Because I feel like all of us start with AAA. It's just
right.
the obvious way. It's the loudest.
It's the one you see. It's the one you see in the store as a kid.
Yeah.
You're at the grocery store. You're at Target or something, and you walk by the electronics section, and you go, "Oh my goodness, that looks amazing! I need that."
Yeah. Eventually, you either hear about a game that you'd never heard of before, or something like that. Like, what kind of started your dive into independent games?
It's probably going to be one of the bigger indie games. I can't think of like a specific game, but the one that I feel like I played the most of indie games is Stardew Valley. That's kind of one of the bigger indie games, and that's one I can think of that I played early, because there were indie games. I mean, if we're talking about indie games as in independent games, something outside of a big publisher, there were probably some maybe by the mid 2010s, but I mean the big wave of indie games didn't really start till like Fez and Super Meat Boy and stuff like that. So I didn't play any Flash games or stuff like that.
Yeah.
Of that indie era, and I didn't have any interest in the big indie games of the mid 2010s. So yeah, probably like 2017, 2018. When did Stardew Valley come out? Did that come out around like 2015? Yeah, okay. So I would have jumped in maybe a couple years after Stardew Valley released.
Mm-hmm.
A friend introduced that to me, and I got hooked on it. Bought it on multiple platforms because I wanted one at home, one on the go. Yeah, that's a fantastic game. I've pumped a ton of hours into that.
It's hard to look back, because there's probably some indie games I just don't even remember. I don't even have anymore. The two earliest indie games, it's funny to think that at one point this one was an indie game. I remember going into a Microsoft store with a friend of mine at the mall, and we're just browsing and playing games on the laptop, like cool math games and stuff like that. And I saw an Xbox One like way off in the corner. It's just like no one was touching it. It wasn't meant to be super presentable. It was just there. It was hooked up to a TV. And I walked over there and I was looking at the games, and they had one on there that I was like, I just watched like a quick clip of it on the Xbox One, and there was something about it that just it did something for me. I was like, this looks kind of interesting. And I got to play a little bit of the game, and I was like, wow, this is kind of cool. Like I have never seen anything like this. And the game was The Final Station. And
oh, okay.
And I remember forgetting about the game for a long time, like a year probably. And then when I got my Switch, I was browsing the Switch eShop and I saw the game on there and I was like, oh yeah, that was that game I played on the Xbox like a year ago. And so I bought it on the Switch with no hesitation and I played it and I was like, wow, that was really cool. And I think that was my first indie game. I would say that Five Nights at Freddy's was my first indie game, but the reason why I don't say that one, because that one happened first. That one happened in 2014, and this other one happened in like 2016. The reason why I don't say FNAF is because even though it technically was my first indie game, it didn't encourage me to play more indie games. It just got me into that one game.
Okay.
And nowadays that is not an indie game. Well, actually, it's technically it's one of those indie games that's like it's very, very popular, but it's still technically an indie game.
It is such a weird thing considering it started as an indie game and now has a movie.
Yeah.
Like not quite blockbuster, but a Hollywood movie. I don't think there's any other indie game that has ever achieved that level of success yet.
So going off of that, like, do you think that the gaming industry in the last like 5 years has hit quite a few impressive lows? Do you think that
it has? Yeah.
Do you think that we'll ever reach a point where the general audience is just completely done with AAA and they move to indie, or do you think indie will always just be like a second choice?
I think I alluded to it a little bit earlier, but there are two camps. It's indie and like indie. Oh, I guess it's not true that there's exactly two camps. You have indie, you have more AA, and then AAA. But what I meant by that was there is just casual gamers, and they do not care about game as an art form or games like the exact gameplay mechanics and stuff like that. They're there to have a fun time. I have a friend and all he plays is FIFA. That's the only game he plays. And I told another one of my friends, like, he is the problem. He is the reason why the gaming industry is the way it is. Like, they can do, there's AAA games have gotten more and more pricey, mechanics that are counterintuitive to gamers, such as like loot boxes and live services and stuff like that. Like, true gamers are annoyed by those, but casual gamers know nothing else but those games, and they're there to have a fun time, and they'll spend those now $70 every year or so to buy the next Call of Duty, the next FIFA, just to have that experience. And they don't play that much, and that's okay. But for us, who enjoy games more as a medium than just casual play for an hour every now and then, we do care about the mechanics, the graphics, not just like the graphical fidelity, how realistic it is, but also the art style and the creative direction. The story, there's amazing storytelling video games that you cannot get in any other medium. And that will thrive in the indie gaming sphere. And those two will sit in their separate camps. There are fantastic AAA games with amazing storytelling and all that stuff. And there's indie games that are just as terrible as AAA games in terms of monetization and stuff like that. There's always exceptions, but indie won't be mainstream. AAA will not die. They will always be. It's the same with like indie movies and like blockbusters. Like, Disney won't die. It's too big to fail at this point. I mean, who knows? Maybe eventually it'll die and then that will age like milk. But like, big Hollywood is here to stay. and everyone knows Star Wars and Marvel and DC and stuff like that now, but then you also have smaller films that no one's really heard of except for people who really enjoy a genre or really enjoy a director, and they love that their little corner, and people who just want to go see a fun movie in the theaters, they'll enjoy their thing.
Yeah, it's kind of a shame, because I feel like it's similar to politics, where you have the silent majority and the loud minority. I feel like the minority in games are like the people who see the patterns, the people who see all of the sins of like AAA studios, and they call them out for it, and they stand against it, and they don't want those in their games. And there's so much outcry whenever a new Call of Duty game comes out and it's $70 and it's got a half-baked game in there with a $30 battle pass and stuff like that. It's like there's so much outcry for that, but we often forget the perspective that even though from our point of view there's so much outcry, there's so much rage about it, but in reality there's like tenfold the amount of players who just buy it because it's COD. They just buy it because all they know is Call of Duty, and they've done that with every Call of Duty. Exactly.
The only way that changes is if eventually they get burned by the game. If they're like, oh wait, I actually don't like what they did in this new one. I don't like. I feel like the price jump from 60 to 70 was fine because it's kind of everything with inflation right now. Like most people won't care. But things like, oh, you're locking skins that I used to have. I actually don't know how Call of Duty works, so please correct me if I'm wrong. But like in previous games, would you just get skins and cosmetics through just progressing in multiplayer, or
like in there are some skins that you can unlock in game, but the vast majority of the skins, that's the business model. It's the microtransactions.
Has it been like that for like the last 5-6 years, or has it been that way longer?
The first game that I remember doing that was Modern Warfare 2019. So I'd say it's been like the last 5 years or so where microtransactions have been the business model. But yeah, I think with COD it's interesting. I think a lot of people, even casual gamers, are starting to see the patterns, and they're starting to dislike Activision for it. I don't think we're going to see any major change for a while, because they're still selling really well. Like they're still like top selling games. But I think after a few more games, I think eventually people are going to get it, and we're going to see people stop buying the games.
I think one thing that'll hurt the new Call of Duty, what is it, Black Ops 6? Whatever the new one they just announced, like 2 weeks ago. It's coming to day one on Game Pass, and it has been shown for a couple other smaller games that Game Pass does hurt sales, and Xbox has not taken into consideration Game Pass. So COD might be hurt by people who have Game Pass, and they're just like, oh, I'll just play this because it's on here, rather than going out and buying Black Ops 6. But that's a completely different conversation about subscription models.
What do you think the AAA industry could learn from indie games, if anything? Which I know they could, but
they definitely can. Yes. It's interesting because they were starting to learn it a little bit, just a little bit, and then Xbox came and ruined everything. But I'll get into that. A few things that I thought of, just like indie games are very experimental. They love to take an existing genre, bring something new to the table, or combine different ideas into something new. Like for instance, Hi-Fi Rush, that was from Bethesda. It was technically TangoWorks under Bethesda, but still, it was like a double A studio under a big triple A studio that made this fantastic game. It's a rhythm beat 'em up, and it worked tremendously. I love it. And then Xbox went, oh hey, you actually didn't make a ton of money compared to Call of Duty back here, even though Hi-Fi Rush was a success relative to its own budget. And so they canned the entire studio, just shut down, which is so upsetting. But like TangoWorks found that they realized, hey, we found something new and experimental, and it worked. Now, not every time that you do something experimental will work, and that's probably why AAA stays safe, but I feel like someone who does that really well is Nintendo. I mean, did you see The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom trailer? A Zelda game with no direct combat and a potential to maybe break the game engine. They probably won't, because like in Tears of the Kingdom, they put some pretty good limits on their systems, but like it's such a bizarre and outlandish new take on the series that I would have never thought of, but it looks really cool and I'll give it a try. So I feel like Nintendo, their model always seems to be come up with something new, like never repeat the same thing over and over again, which I think that's why I love them so much compared to like Xbox and PlayStation, just because everyone else I feel like is too scared, or I should correct, the board of directors is scared that they won't make enough money for their investors.
Yeah. I think that AAA studios are too scared of taking risks, and when they do take a risk and it doesn't work right away, they just pull the plug and they go right back to what they were doing before.
Yeah, and sometimes those risks that they take are not the right risks. Like for instance, Arcane Studios, which was the other, or Arcane Austin, which is the other studio that Xbox closed with TangoWorks, who made Hi-Fi Rush. Arcane Austin made Redfall, which was considered one of the top 5 worst games of last year. They're not used to multiplayer looter shooters. They're used to single player stealth games. And Xbox said, hey, let's risk this brand new IP on a well-beloved studio, and let's have them do trend chasing instead and do some multiplayer online looter shooter instead. And when that failed, and then they just closed the studio instead. So yeah, if they take risks, sometimes they take them in the wrong direction, and then I feel like half the time they learn the wrong lessons from failures or successes.
I think for me, something I've always thought about with indie and AAA development teams is there's something that most indie studios do pretty well that I wish AAA studios would do more often, is the art of communication. I feel like there are so many big studios that could really help their case with the games that they're making if they just communicated a little bit better to their target audience. I've been playing a lot of Helldivers, and I just love how much the guy who makes that and the team behind that, I think it's Arrowhead, I love how much they just seem to care about the people who are actually playing it, and they talk to them and they receive feedback and all this kind of stuff. But my bringing up Call of Duty again, like I think my biggest problem with Activision is that it feels like you're never able to truly talk to the person making the game. It feels like you're always speaking to a brick wall. And like
right, but I think that's also like the nature of how big some of those teams are, and sometimes it's multiple teams across multiple studios, and so it's hard to like pinpoint a specific person. But like with Arrowhead and Helldivers 2, they did have someone, like even though it was probably a larger team, I don't know how big the team was, but they had those designated people that were just community outreach people, and they helped weather the PlayStation Network scandal for Helldivers 2.
So you have also started to dabble in game development? I know
I
you
have.
Go ahead.
No, I was agreeing.
Okay. I was just gonna say, I know you haven't made a ton of stuff, and the stuff that you have made have more been like tests of your own skill more than full-fledged games. But what are some games aside from Mario Wonder that you think you take a lot of inspiration from and that you want to emulate when like just maybe like just a game or maybe a vibe that you like to bring to your games?
Yeah. So for those listening, what he's referring to is, well, first of all, I did finally start making my own games after playing games for years and watching a bunch of people on YouTube, devlogs and stuff like that, and Game Maker's Toolkit on like the game mechanics and what works and what doesn't. I was like, you know what? I think I can do this. I used to do coding as a hobby. I feel like I can do this. So last year, like last December, I made a game in a week, and it was a terrible little game. It's not terrible, but it's not a game that I would release to the public in its current state. It was just a simple little game that was meant to prove that I could make something from beginning to end, from proof of concept to finished product. And then I participated in a game jam in early January. For those who don't know what that is, you basically have a time limit to make a game. You get told the theme at minute 1, and by hour 72, which is, I believe, how long mine was, you have to submit the game. And I made a quick little puzzle game in 3 days, and that was a ton of fun. And then I got really busy, and I haven't had a ton of time to work on stuff since. But I am working on something right now, and as Shane said, Super Mario Bros. Wonder was an inspiration for it. Playing through that, and specifically the Jet Run badge, where you basically run without being able to stop. I said, I feel like I want to try something in this genre, expand it a little bit more than just a cute little add-on in the game. So that's what I'm working on right now. Obviously, I have not had a ton of time because I'm at school full time, and my brain cannot handle learning all day and then trying to do bug fixing all night. Yeah, so I haven't made a ton of progress, but I feel like some other inspirations just outside of that. I do have, like, as I'm working on this game, I'm thinking about the next projects. I have these big kind of end goal projects in mind. When I get good enough, when I have enough clout, then basically once I can reach an audience to where people can experience the game I create, then I'll start making those big games. And those inspirations are like the Mario and Luigi series with their creative turn-based combat. I think Stardew Valley with some of its more like farming mechanics, but also there was a game called Moonlighter where you are a shopkeeper, and I liked the idea of like running a shop. I do really like management style games, so some of my favorites have just been like, you just run a shop, just buy the stuff. But I feel like a lot of the games don't do like, you have to buy the stuff, you have to choose where to store it and stuff like that. So I do have an idea in that regard of a more in-depth management game, but something that won't scare away casual players. But as a solo developer right now, a lot of the stuff that I'm learning is just everything. Not only am I coding a game, but I'm making the art, I'm making the special effects. I mean, I can find free music, but I would like to either find people to make music with or learn how to make music. And so there are a lot of people around, especially Twitter has a huge indie developer scene of just other people like me who are just making their dream little games out of their own art and their own music and stuff like that. And I find those to be a bigger inspiration than just playing games, because I'm seeing other people making what they want. And that's what I would like to do eventually.
Yeah. Yeah, you just got to start networking with people.
Yeah, yeah, just start networking. Yeah, find those people. There are also Discord spaces that I have yet to get to, that are just people like me who are just like, hey, I'm good at this. Let's collaborate. There is an even nicher area in indie games, which is just indie devs, and they are all a very tight knit group and love helping each other out.
Is there a genre of gaming that maybe scares you as someone that, like, as a developer, you're like, oh, I can't imagine making a game like that. Like, that would be awful.
As someone who does not really care for the like FPS genre, that anything honestly that is in real time scares me. But like FPS specifically, like that's fast paced movement, and that's a lot of, whenever I see games in the FPS genre now I'm thinking of it as a game developer, and I'm like, oh, there's a lot of stuff that's going into that. It's probably not scary once you actually dissect it, but as someone who's only done a simple little puzzle game and like a little arcade style endless game, stuff that like complex 3D movement and like mechanics on top of mechanics, stuff like that scares me. But something like a turn-based strategy game, or like a management style game, something where I can piece apart the different mechanics, like I have to do this first and then I can do this, like that's a little easier. Or like the platformer that I'm working on right now, that's not too hard. You make the guy move the way you want to, and then you make the obstacles and enemies and other mechanics, and then you kind of just put the building blocks together in different levels, and that's kind of it.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know if I would ever get into game development, but I can think of games and genres that I would want to make.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe. It's like the art style that I've recently fallen in love with. There's two games that use very similar art style. One of them kind of popped off on YouTube for a while. It's called Buckshot Roulette.
Yeah, I've heard of that one.
And then the other one was like a really short horror game called Iron Lung, which also got pretty popular on YouTube.
They very much have this new indie, there's like a new section of indie games that are starting to work with like nostalgic aesthetics, specifically for PlayStation 1. And this is very much in that style, which is something I love and have thought about doing eventually, is like a PlayStation 1 style game. There's a lot of indie devs now who are looking back at their childhood games and that, like N64, PS1, like Dreamcast era games, and are starting to kind of emulate that style and figure out how it works, and not just emulating it one-to-one, but then improving in those new modern ways to make those rose-tinted goggles work.
I think that's about it. Is there anything you want to say to people who are trying to make their own games? Like anything super quick that you learned that you could bestow to other people?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me was just starting, because I spent so long, several summers worth of just attempting to start coding again, but it was just a ton of tutorials and classes and stuff like that. But I just kept going through them over and over again. Just, I need to learn how to do this and I need to learn how to do that. And then eventually I just told myself, wait, if I just have a general understanding of like the coding language, then everything else is just a logic puzzle. And so, or you can just look up the exact solution you're looking for online and just look at that one thing. But like, there's no reason why someone shouldn't be able to just start working on, as long as you know how to code in that language, then you can just start your own game. Experiment, mess up, sit with a bug for a day, and try and figure out what's wrong with it and go look it up and look at YouTube videos and look at forums, and it's a lot of trial and error. But in the end, it is worth it.
Mm-hmm. I actually did just think of one last question. This is a fun
Okay, one more question. Yes,
one more question.
Give me the fun question.
What is a game, new or old? Actually, I'd say maybe a little bit more newer, more modern, something you recent, last 5 years. What is a game that you absolutely just detest? That you cannot stand it. You cannot stand it when videos about it show up on your feed. You can't stand it when people talk about how good it is or whatever. You're just like, this is awful. It could be personal opinion. It could be more factual, like you just genuinely don't think it's a good game.
It's a good question. It's hard to pinpoint like in the last like 5 years if there's anything that I've like specifically hated, because I think it is a little older than that. But yeah, it's gonna have to be Fortnite.
Okay.
I'll give my reasons, because I know you liked Fortnite for a long time, and I have friends who play that a lot. It started a lot of the trends that I now hate in the gaming industry. It's the most successful live service ever. And there are a ton of games that either got transferred into live service games or were started as a live service game that are just dead now because they didn't do Fortnite successful. Like the new Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League game was a live service game, and it was dead on launch.
Yeah.
Or like Marvel's Avengers that also died pretty quickly. Yeah, that's kind of the biggest thing that I can think of from that I don't like. But also, I don't like super mainstream stuff like that. It was just like everyone and their mother was playing that game, and so based on that alone, I just didn't want to play it. And you know what it is? It's also the culture that surrounded it too. Because if I say I'm a gamer or I play games, and then I say that I play Fortnite, then a lot of people just kind of associate me with the Fortnite culture of like a bunch of 12-year-olds on TikTok, which is why I don't like it.
I can agree with you there. I think Fortnite is a fantastic game, but I think that it did set a lot of really bad precedents in terms of like business practice.
Right, yeah. Nothing against like the game itself, or like it's a free to play game, so put in whatever monetary like systems you want, microtransactions, season passes, stuff like that. Like put in whatever you want. It's a free to play game, but if you're putting that in a $60-$70 game, no thank you. Please take better lessons from Fortnite's success.
Yeah, I think that's the part I would agree with. I think that Fortnite is the game. There were other games that did it before Fortnite, but Fortnite was the one that really popularized the battle pass system and the constant rotating daily shop of cosmetics. And you know, like you said, you do that in a free game. I still have some problems with it, but with Fortnite, at least it's all cosmetic and there's no, you don't have any upper hand in gameplay.
Right, it's not pay to win.
Yeah, but that system started to leak into, like you said, a game that's already $60 and I got to shell out another $20 to get the day one content. And now with like Star Wars Outlaws, we're starting to see entire parts of game, like, you know, game modes that are locked behind a season pass, you know.
Yeah, like, I had that written in my notes. I'm upset about that.
Yeah, it's like, really? But so it's, yeah, Fortnite was, I would say, a great influence on just how to make a game fun and how to make a game enjoyable in live service, but was not a great influence on how to squeeze money out of people.
Right. And what most game studios and publishers didn't realize is it's expensive to have a live service game. You have to constantly have your developers making new content. It's a sinkhole that you just keep throwing money into. I think I saw an article like a year ago or something like that Epic is still like recouping their losses from Fortnite. Like it hasn't been profitable in its own budget yet, but it's still so successful that it will help fund other sections of Epic Games. And that's what developers and publishers didn't realize when they did Anthem or like Suicide Squad or Marvel's Avengers, like, or Babylon's Fall. I'm struggling to remember the games. I had to look up the games again because I knew when they launched and then they died and they left my brain because they weren't as memorable.
Did you follow the story of the day before?
Oh gosh. Oh, I forgot about the day before.
Well, that one's very memorable, but for a different reason.
Yes. Very infamous.
Yeah. Dude, friggin' Moist Critical's story, just his way of following that story was so hilarious.
Every time there was a new Moist Critical video on that, I ate it up immediately.
Is there any way that people can, I know you're not a big social media guy, but is there any way that people can follow you in various stuff?
Yeah. If I ever decide to put stuff on my Twitter of all my gaming development stuff, that's at awkwardy _ AWEQWERTY. Also, if you want to play the games that I make whenever they release, you can follow me on itch.io. Also, my username is awkwardy, just without the underscore. I have one available game to play if you want to see me put my money where my mouth is. You can play my Game Jam game out there, Decode Decrypt, that I made in January. That's the only thing that I really have out on social media that you can find of me, because my Twitter is pretty much dead at the moment. But yeah, not a big social media guy, but those are the two places that one I might do and one that I definitely will update.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you for coming on to Cornerstone. That was a lot of fun.
Yes, thank you for having me.
And maybe we'll get you on again.
Maybe
later. I'm not good at outros. All right. Well, I'll talk to you in a little bit, and
all right.
I will wrap this up here.
All right. Bye.
See ya.